Hi, Valley, and welcome once again to the Rock and Roll Research Podcast, where we share the super cool backstories and side gigs of the research and insights pros that you trust. Today's guest is Susan Griffin, who's had a wonderful career in the research and insights industry, among other things, having served as the Chief Marketing Officer for BrainJuicer, which is now known as System One, and also having served on the Marketing Insights Council for the American Marketing Association with yours truly. And It was a great time.
Yeah, great times. Lots of fun times.
Absolutely, absolutely. But today, Susan is the principal of the Griffin and Skeggs Collaborative, where she works with clients in market research and beyond to develop big picture creative and marketing strategies. But I know Susan, and I know there's so much more to Susan than that. So she'll tell you all about it today. So welcome, Susan.
Thank you so much for having me, Matt. I'm really honored because I can't say, I'm a groupie trying to advance my status to roadie in the rock and roll pantheon, but hopefully I won't disappoint.
You know what? You're totally there, and I can tell you that the honor is all mine. So thank you so much for being on the show. So let's jump into it. So I really want to know how you first got your start in the market research industry, and then after that, maybe tell us a little bit about what you're doing with Griffin and Skeggs.
Sure. So I've been in the periphery of this industry for a very long time, and I find that most of us really are accidental tourists. We got into this business not because we woke up in third grade and said, I want to be a market researcher, although there's some people who do. Actually, it's funny, I once did a podcast for one of the associations, and I did it with a partner, and we led off with a variation on Willie Nelson's song, and we called it "Mothers Don't Let Your Children Grow Up to Be Market Researchers." But the way I got into this business is really pretty funny. I got out of college, I was underemployed, I had to make rent, and one of my housemates worked as a freelance market researcher and hired me to do door-to-door polling for Lewis Harris. I'm dating myself.
Oh, wow.
In South Boston. And I was also doing phone polling, typically political phone polling for WBZ in Boston. I was living in Boston at the time. Mm-hmm. But basically it was to make rent, and it was fascinating to me, but I had other ambitions. But in my career, I kept bumping up against market research. I commissioned market research. I ate my weight in Twizzlers and pretzels behind the glass wall. And at one point I worked for an analyst firm, and then I was recruited by GMI, the panel company.
Yeah.
And actually, BrainJuicer was my client when I worked for GMI. And as you said, I served as CMO for BrainJuicer for 9 years, which was fascinating. And then when I left in 2017, I realized that market research companies are actually pretty rubbish at marketing themselves. I mean, here we are, we're as an industry, we're telling our clients how to market themselves and their products to consumers. And yet it's really tough for us to market ourselves.
Right.
So I found that many people knew what I had done when I was at BrainJuicer. So I decided to set up consultancy to try to help other agencies in what I call the dark arts of marketing, which is funny, but it's in some ways very intuitive, but it's I find that market research agencies need a spirit guide to help them find their way in telling their own stories and in differentiating themselves.
Exactly.
And so at Griffin and Skeggs, we kind of run the gamut. We do marketing strategy, communication strategy. We create execution plans for various aspects of marketing. We do branding. And overall, that sort of virtuous circle of all of the components that make a marketing program that can actually generate revenue for clients. At least that's
Right.
what I like to think we do.
Yeah, you know what? It just as our clients in market research need an outside voice, sometimes it's abundantly clear that a lot of market research agencies need that outside perspective in helping to tell their story.
Yeah, it's really tough, I think, for agencies, particularly now that the landscape is so fragmented in terms of the kinds of things that agencies do.
Sure.
Because most market research agencies have a tendency to tell you what they do, as opposed to tell you the business problems they're solving for clients.
Right. Yep.
And that's what I really try to help clients understand. I mean, one of the things I like to tell clients is, if you really want to market your market research agency, you've got to think like a baker.
Right.
And there's two kinds of bakers. There's the baker who says, we have butter, we have flour, we have sugar, we have ovens, we bake cakes. Do you want some?
Right.
Then there's the baker who says, we help you make your most important life moments memorable with sweet confections.
Right.
And it's that, it's the difference between saying we do conjoint and max diff versus saying we help you optimize your advertising spend, or we help you create product innovations that will succeed in the marketplace. I mean, and part of it's because the clients of market research right now are so time constrained. They want to know what you can do for them in that nanosecond. So anyway, that's my, I mean, I'm on a soapbox all the time, beating the drum about that narrative. What's your narrative? What's your differentiation?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. I've heard that time and time again. Tell me why you're different. Just tell me why you're different.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Cool. So I know that you have another passion that you've been cultivating your whole life, and you're doing some cool stuff with your own side gig, which I believe is called Wayward Creatives Entertainment. So
yes.
Tell us a little bit about that as well.
Again, when I left, before I left BrainJuicer, I've always been interested in the incubation of early stage storytelling in theater and films. And we are blessed with an amazing daughter who is literally a working actress. And over the course of her emerging as this creative and introducing us to the cohort of creative people around her in high school and in college, I saw how difficult it was for playwrights, composers, even performers to get to base camp, right? And so I have this passion for incubating really early work. Now, my husband likes to try to remind me that this is not a business model. I mean, just to frame it out, 95% of all Broadway shows never recoup their investments.
Wow, 95%?
It's staggering.
Oh, that's amazing.
So in my last year at BrainJuicer, I took a sabbatical. When you work for BrainJuicer for a certain number of years, you got a 1 month paid sabbatical. And instead of going to Fiji or learning to play golf, I offered myself as an intern to a producer who was producing a show in a festival, a new musical, a very, very early stage musical.
Sure.
So after we made a lot of jokes about, Robert De Niro in The Intern,
Yeah, right.
I basically started to learn the business of the business.
Cool.
And then I actually, subsequent to leaving BrainJuicer, while I was building Griffin Skeggs Collaborative, I also took a lot of courses in producing theater. And so my side gig has been literally helping shows, plays, playwrights get to that first stage.
Right.
It's grueling, the trajectory for getting a show to Broadway. And again, that gargantuan statistic that 95% of shows that make it to Broadway are never profitable.
Right.
But that it takes typically 10 years to get a show from its first industry reading in a fluorescently lit room with music stands to the point where it's even off Broadway or in a regional theater company.
Right.
And so
it's amazing.
I've been doing a variety of things with emerging, and not necessarily young, but emerging playwrights, performers. I produce a show for a drag comedian. I mean,
Yeah.
I've been kind of all over the map, but there's something really astonishing about the tenacity and stamina of people who actually get work produced. And I just love being there.
Yeah, that's great. It's an absolutely grueling road, I'm sure, as it is for musicians too. To be a working musician is incredible. But I have to ask because we talked about this before. So can you talk a little bit about, you mentioned your daughter, who was, I know was in a Tony Award winning show, which is great. But she's working on a new project that's like super rock and roll. Is that something you can talk about?
Well, talking about our daughter, how much time do you have? There is a musical called Gypsy, which is all about a stage mother, and the character's name is Mama Rose, and I have been accused of being Mama Rose a lot of times. So our daughter went to the high school that the movie Fame was based on, and then she went to Emerson College. But when she was in high school, she was cast in an off-Broadway show, and again, the percentage. Another stat, at any given moment in time, in the Actors Union, 97% of the members are out of work.
Wow.
Right. So the percentage of performers who quote unquote make it is ridiculously small. So again, stamina, tenacity, and there are 17 unions that oversee 14 contracts on Broadway, and that ranges from the musicians to the hair and makeup people to the press agents to the actors. It's incredible. So anyway, Emily Skeggs is our daughter. She went to Emerson College, graduated, and she was auditioning, and she got called to be an understudy at the Public Theater in a production called Fun Home. And lo and behold, the woman she was understudying had to leave the show, and she took over the role at the Public. And then months and months and months and months and months went by, and they transferred the show to Broadway. And it was a musical. It won the Tony the year before Hamilton won the Tony.
Right.
And she was nominated in her first show for
Amazing.
a Tony for Best Supporting Actress.
It's
And
incredible.
it's funny because somebody said to me, I bet you were happy when Emily got that breakthrough because it's such a hard business. Because I bet you were worried that she wasn't going to make it. And I said, on the contrary, what I was worried about was that she was going to give up one audition shy of a breakthrough.
Mhm.
Right.
Right.
So she went on to do a bunch of film and TV. She moved to LA. She likes to remind me that even Meryl Streep is looking for work during the pandemic because there's no theater and very few shows are shooting. But she was in a movie called Dinner in America, where she played the lead, and that premiered at Sundance last year. And
Okay.
they just got distribution in the UK, and we're hoping they'll get distribution in the US pretty soon. I mentioned
Awesome.
the fact that we needed hours if I was going to talk about Emily. But you know, what's interesting is that I think that when I look at market research, you know, this is maybe an oblique line to draw. But when I particularly look at people in sales and market research, I have to look at it through the lens of that tenacity and stamina that I see so often in theater, right?
Right.
Because if the research industry could just take a page from theater, you know,
Right.
I mean, brands take a page from theater. I mean, there'll be a show that makes it to Broadway, right? And then another show comes along and people start buying tickets to that show, and the long running show starts losing market share, right? Well, isn't that the same thing as a brand used most often
Sure.
gets disintermediated by a challenger brand?
Right.
I mean,
right.
there's so many lessons to be learned, but I think the most important one is that never give up, that tenacity, that finding a way. You know, and it's funny because our daughter, when she was little, she would say to me, "Mom, do we have to introduce ourselves to absolutely everyone?" And in a strange way, I think she kind of learned a little bit from me that the idea of networking and making connections, and sometimes those connections that aren't immediately going to reap some benefit, what I call the non-commissionable transaction. You know, giving because it keeps you top of mind. So she has said that she's learned a lot about networking and leveraging her own connections by sort of watching me, which is kind of like a reality TV show.
No, that's really cool. I mean, you think of these as completely different industries that probably share nothing in common, but you know, industries sort of have a structure that work similarly, and there are lessons that can be drawn from one to the other. So that's really cool. All right, Susan. So this is a podcast, right? And I know that you've already mentioned you've been on other podcasts. You probably listened to some as well. Are there any that you might recommend, or maybe other media, either personally, professionally, that people might be interested
in? A podcast I recommend other than yours?
Other than mine.
Which, by the way, is phenomenal. I mean, I love the idea of you uncovering these very interesting sidebars, and I wish I played in a band. No, that wouldn't be any
No,
good.
you don't.
I mean, I really think that you're doing a service to the industry by showcasing the three-dimensional, 360 humanity of the people who work in market research. But other
Thank
than
you.
your podcast, I have become a huge fangirl of a podcast by two behavioral scientists, and it's called the Behavioral Grooves. They've done
Okay.
219 podcasts.
Wow.
With all the leading lights in behavioral science. And they're I don't know if you remember the old radio show Car Talk.
Yep.
Very
Click and clack.
Click and clack, the Tackett
right.
brothers, absolutely. But they made things very human, and the two guys who run Behavioral Grooves make behavioral science very accessible, and they are like excruciatingly smart in that very arcane, art and science of understanding human behavior.
Sure.
They've worked with Dan Ariely, but they make it so accessible and fun. So I'm a huge fangirl of theirs.
That's great. I will I'll link to that when I post this video.
Awesome. They're great
Awesome.
guys. They're from Minnesota.
Hey,
and actually
those are my people.
they're rock and roll too. Tim is a songwriter. Tim Houlihan is a songwriter. And
Okay.
they know every grunge and punk band that ever played in a sticky floor bar in
You're speaking my language. You're speaking my language. I've been to all of those bars.
They are great.
Super cool. Awesome. Well, I'll definitely check that out. I'll link to it, and I might try and get in touch with those guys.
I think you should.
Talk about.
I can make that transaction happen. I can make that marriage.
Okay, we'll do that. All right. So the all-important question, Susan. So we've talked some market research. We've talked some theater. I might have some guesses about where this might go, but now it's down to brass tacks.
Okay.
So you're stranded.
Ready.
You're ready. Okay. You're stranded on a desert island. You have 3 records to keep you company for the rest of your days. Just 3 of your choosing. What are those records?
Just 3.
Just 3.
All right. Well, first of all would be the original cast album of Fun Home.
Absolutely.
Right.
Personal connection there.
And Emily's song, which was Changing My Major to Joan. You have to listen to it.
Okay.
Second would be, I'm also a huge fan of jazz, and I had the privilege of working with Kurt Elling, who is one of the leading male jazz vocalists in the world right now. He has an album called Passion Worlds, where he basically metaphorically went all over the globe and pulled songs and did jazz interpretations of them, covered some, wrote some with another good friend of ours, Phil Galdston, who's a Grammy-nominated songwriter. So that would be the second.
I love that. That sounds cool.
Third would be John Batiste.
John Batiste.
John Batiste is the musical director for Stephen Colbert.
Oh, interesting.
Right.
Okay.
He produced an album called Hollywood Africans. He is a performer of color, grew up in New Orleans, I think. Just a phenomenal performer. And he actually he created the character and wrote the song that just won the Oscar for the Pixar movie Soul, the animated film about the pianist.
Right.
Fascinating. If you don't know his work as a musician, he's just astonishing. I mean, really, and a generous human too. So, I mean, those are my 3. Except I would sneak into my suitcase everything that Sondheim ever wrote.
Okay.
according to Sondheim. But that's cheating. That's more than 3.
That's that's a back pocket, right?
Yeah.
That works.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting because you've picked 3 that you've talked me into being intrigued by. So
I'm
so I love
telling you,
it.
if you don't know Kurt Elling, he's just an astonishing vocal performer, and he actually wrote a radio play noir musical that, because of his fame, premiered at Lincoln Center at Jazz at
Wow.
Lincoln Center in a 1,200 seat theater. That never
It's
happens.
amazing. Yeah.
That never happens. And that's called The Big Blind. So watch for that.
Cool. Awesome. Excellent. Well, really appreciate your time, Susan. It's always great to catch up, as always.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
I hope we didn't run over long. And,
No, not at all.
And, I look forward to seeing all the other rock and roll research rock stars that you showcase on the podcast.
Well, thank you. I will keep doing it as long as I keep finding interesting guests. So far, so good. So thank
Shout
you.
if I can help.
All right. Absolutely. Thanks again for sharing your story, Susan, and rock and roll.
Oh, wait a minute. Oh, wait a minute. No, jazz hands. Jazz hands.
All right. Thanks, Susan.
Yeah.